I am from a half Italian family. My mother came to the United States in 1956, and my grandmother and my uncle came about 8 years earlier. So I eat a lot of great Italian food. Manicotti, manicotti for most of us, but in the family it's manicotti. Lasagna, spaghetti and meatballs, anchovy fritters, which really don't sound that delicious, but trust me, they are. All kinds of really wonderful food. And my Italian family are very competitive cooks. They all think they cook better than each other, and they all think they cook better than anybody else in the world. If you've ever seen this book called The Italians, it's all about Italian culture. And one of the things that Italians will do, no matter where they go in the world on vacation, whether it's India or South Africa or Iceland, they'll seek out the Italian restaurant because nobody cooks better than the Italians. So they're so competitive that my Hungarian father, who immigrated the same year as my mother in 1956, he learned my grandmother's sauce recipe so that he could say, he taught my mother how to make sauce because he had to get into the mix. Every month at our monthly family dinners, we all get together once a month on a Sunday. The Italian side of my family, we all get together and we have a big family dinner. We all get together and we cook together. And it's kind of a crazy time. And a lot of times, you know, they're looking at me and talking about me. And one of the problems with me is that I went to culinary school, which they could never understand. Why are you going to culinary school? You're Italian. Look, they don't call me Liz, they call me Lisa. Look, Lisa had to go to culinary school. She didn't know how to cook. She had to go to culinary school. No, don't take Lisa's advice on the roasted peppers. She had to go to culinary school. So, one of our traditions is on Christmas Eve, we make ravioli that we eat on Christmas Day. So we make that on Christmas Eve afternoon or Christmas Eve night. We either get together at my mother's house or my uncle's house because they only live 3 blocks apart. And it didn't matter whose house we got together at. It was kind of, again, a crazy time where you go to the house, you start making the ravioli, and there's all kinds of opinions flying around, usually between my mother and my uncle. Number one, over who helped my grandmother, my blind grandmother, make ravioli back in Italy. My uncle insisted he helped her, and my mother's like, no, he didn't help her, I helped her. No, I helped her. No, you're crazy, you didn't help her. She used a rolling pin. No, she didn't use a rolling pin, she used a broomstick. No, she didn't use a broomstick, she used a wine bottle. No, she used the broomstick. She cut the ravioli with the glass. No, she didn't cut the ravioli with the glass. She cut the ravioli with the wheel, which means a pastry wheel, but they just call it the wheel. And just back and forth like this. And my job through all of this is just to pinch the edges of the ravioli so that the filling doesn't leak out, which my uncle continually reminds me, you wouldn't have to do that if you used the glass. Well, we are using the glass. Well, you don't use the glass, you use the wheel, but we're using the glass. You don't have to pinch it. Well, the thing is that you put so much filling into the ravioli that, as my uncle and mother would tell you, ravioli in America is all wrong because you never have the edge there. The pinch I did was just so tiny. The filling goes right to the edge, so it's just like a pillow. There's no edge to that. So one year, my mother and my uncle were not speaking. They were not on speaking terms. And my mother said to me, without an ounce of irony, your uncle is dead to me now. And he can forget about the ravioli. So that Christmas Eve, I went over to stopped by my uncle's celebration, and we chit-chatted for a little while, and he said, give your mother a call, tell her to come over. Uncle Jimmy, she's not gonna come over. Give her a call, tell her to come over. She's not gonna come over. Well, then give her a call, ask her for a ravioli recipe. Turns out he hadn't helped my grandmother quite as much as he had claimed. So, you know, you don't say no to your uncle. You don't say no to any of your Italian relatives when you're younger than them. Even if they're your 13-year-old cousin and you're 12, you say yes. So I get out my cell phone and I dial up my mother. Hey, Mom. And she says, "Where are you?" I said, "Oh, I'm over at Uncle Jimmy's, I'm over at Randy's, my cousin's." She's like, "Yeah, I'm not coming over." I said, "I know, I told him. But are you sure you don't want to come?" "I'm not coming over." "Well, I told him you weren't going to come over." And my uncle is sitting like this close to me going, "Tell her to come over, tell her to come over." So she quickly changes the subject. "What have you been doing today? When are you coming over to help me with my ravioli?" Because it is Christmas Eve. "How's your boyfriend?" Anything. I mean, she hated my boyfriend, so I know she didn't care, why she was bringing that up. So finally, my uncle is like, "Come on, let's get the recipe." So finally, I get the nerve to ask her, "So, Mom, how many eggs for the ravioli?" I'm not giving him the recipe. He's not getting that ravioli recipe. And so I'm looking at him as he's not giving it up. He's like, "Ask her again." So I asked her. Finally, she gives it up because in her mind, what the hell did it matter if he gets the ravioli recipe? He doesn't know how to make ravioli. So after Christmas, I stopped by my uncle's house, and we chit-chat for a few minutes. And then, of course, he quickly asks, "So did you tell your mother how good my ravioli was?" "Oh, yes, Uncle Jimmy. I told her it was stellar, just perfect." "Did you tell her I cut it with the glass?" "Yes, I told her you cut it with the glass. It was beautiful." I'd never tasted my uncle's ravioli, but him telling me it was good was enough. I couldn't stay at my cousin's house and eat his ravioli. My mother would have killed me if she would have found out I was eating his ravioli. So then my mother's 3 blocks around the corner, so I go over to her place, and we chit-chat for a while. She's sitting on her chair. She's like, "So, how was your uncle's ravioli?" "Well, Mom, and I never said this to my mother, but I had to emphasize. I said, it kind of sucked. It fell apart in the water, the filling came out, which is a major faux pas. I said, he used the machine to roll it out, the pasta machine." She just shook her head. I said, "Just wasn't any good." She said, "Well, I knew it wasn't going to be." I said, "Well, maybe you guys, should try to make up." I said, "This is crazy." She said, "Well, this is all your fault." "This is my fault? How is this my fault? You're the reason, you're the problem. You're the reason for this ravioli. I'm the reason for the ravioli." As it turns out, my grandmother, my birthday I have an early December birthday, and we were living in New Jersey at the time, lots of Italian relatives, and when you were a kid and you had a birthday in New Jersey, you didn't invite the neighborhood kids. It was your cousins, their parents, your parents' friends, and then you got hats and cake really just for photographs. And so there was liquor on the sideboard, and there was antipasto on the table, and there was all kinds of food. And so my grandmother decided that we should have ravioli at this celebration for Lisa. So she started making ravioli, and then over time, that ravioli celebration got moved to Christmas. And as I got older, my job continued to be either my grandmother would roll out, or my mother would roll out, they would plop in the filling, and then my job was to take the ravioli, pinch the edges, and line them up on a cloth-covered board until the next day when they would be eaten. So another Christmas, my mother said, "You need to learn how to make this ravioli." She said, "I'm not going to be alive forever." And I said, "Oh, you're crazy." She said, "Well, you need to learn to make it." I had an Italian friend with me that Christmas from Naples, and she was like, "Yeah, you need to learn to make the ravioli. You say you want to be Italian." I'm half Hungarian, but if you're half Italian, it's good enough for them as long as your Hungarian father's not around. He doesn't matter. So my mother says, "Go ahead, let's get going." So she clears the counter. I put the flour on the counter, make the well, drop in the eggs, and then sort of start mixing the eggs inside this volcano, inside this Vesuvius. And then very quickly, the eggs form these tunnels, and they just start dripping down the counter and onto the cabinets and onto the floor. And my Neapolitan friend is laughing, and I'm, thinking, why am I doing this? My job is to pinch the ravioli. I don't make the ravioli. My mother's like, "Get out of the way. You don't know what you're doing. Just stop already." And so she rolls out the dough. So My mother and my uncle are both gone now, and my grandmother died several years ago, back in the 90s. And part of the reason I came to Indiana was to escape the grief of my mother's passing. And you can run as far as you want to, but your family recipes will follow you anywhere you go. So I was making tomato sauce at home on Sundays and playing the Dean Martin, Everybody Loves Somebody Sometimes, and crying in my tomato sauce. But I never tried to make the ravioli because it was not my place to make it. As long as my mother was living, everything was in its perfect place. She made the ravioli, I pinched the edges, we got together at whoever's house we got together at, they argued, whatever. And I was happy there, and I didn't want that to change, even in her absence. So I met a friend here, and we started cooking together. And one week he said, you know what, I want to make fresh pasta. You know how to do that, right? You're Italian. Yeah, no, yeah, sure, yeah, I know how to make pasta. He's like, so we'll do it this Friday night. I'll come over, I'll bring some wine, we'll make pasta. We can make ravioli. Yeah, sure, we can make ravioli. I'm thinking, I can go down to the grocery store and get some wonton wrappers, and I can fold them over. That's a quick way to make, cheat ravioli. So he comes over to the house, and we drink a bottle of wine, because it's usually how we started these evenings, and I had the sauce going, and had a nice, big, thick, bunch of meat, fat on the top of it. And he said, we decided to start making the ravioli. And I said, well, let's get a bunch of towels. I said, because there's a lot of flour. I wasn't telling him the things. I hadn't revealed to him that I didn't know what the hell I was doing with making pasta. And we got our cameras ready, because, we're Instagram, everything has to be documented, So put the flour on the counter, put the eggs into the well, and started mixing. And that pasta dough came together so perfectly that I was just stunned. I even stepped back away from it, when you step back away from something because it's too, you just don't have words to describe, but you need to kind of step away from it for a minute. I just thought to myself, when it was my turn to make the ravioli, then I was able to make it. I knew how to make it all along. I had it right here.